swiftly. There will be no mercy for those who endanger our home. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the metallic clank of boots as guards stationed outside echoed through the stone corridors. The message was clear. The iron grip would tighten. Far below the gilded chambers, the city's lower levels buzzed with unease. Captain Selwyn stood on a high balcony overlooking the sprawling maze of pipes, gears, and flickering lanterns. The twilight sky above framed the floating city like a shattered jewel suspended in the clouds. Selwyn's face, usually stern and unreadable, was shadowed now with uncertainty. The distant murmur of protests, punctuated by shouts and the occasional clash of metal on metal, drifted up from the streets. He had sworn loyalty to Lord Varick, yet the escalating violence weighed on him. Each order to suppress dissent pressed on his conscience, stirring a conflict that threatened to unravel the steadfast soldier beneath the uniform. Meanwhile, in a crammed workshop hidden beneath the city's venting steam pipes, Ilara and Cale met again under the cloak of darkness. The air smelled of oil and scorched metal, punctuated by the soft hiss of steam escaping from a nearby valve. Flickering lamps cast dancing shadows over scattered blueprints and mechanical parts strewn across cluttered tables. Ilara's silver hair fell loosely around her shoulders, a stark contrast to her usual elegant attire, now replaced with a simpler, practical tunic that allowed her more freedom of movement. Cale's soot-streaked face lit up with a nervous smile as he handed her a small gear. "If we can reinforce this part," he whispered, "the engine should hold longer, buy us time to coordinate with the others." Her pale blue eyes met his sharp green ones, a silent promise passing between them. Each secret meeting was a gamble, a delicate dance on the edge of discovery. Yet, the thrill of shared purpose and burgeoning affection lent courage to their hearts. Elsewhere, Myra darted through the crowded lower streets, her lithe frame weaving effortlessly between merchants, artisans, and soldiers. Her curly auburn hair was pulled back tight, and her sharp dark eyes flicked from shadow to shadow as she gathered whispers and rumors. She moved with the practiced grace of one who had trained in secrecy, every step measured, every glance alert. Nearby, Joran crouched beside a battered engine, his broad shoulders hunched over oil-stained tools. The rhythmic clink of his wrench against metal was a steady heartbeat amid the chaos. His pragmatic mind wrestled with the growing tension, balancing the desire for revenge against a hope for a future where the city's castes could coexist without fear. As night deepened, the city's restless energy surged like the steam that powered its engines. The escalating crackdown was a storm-gathering force, threatening to tear apart the fragile alliances woven in shadows. Ilara and Cale knew the stakes more clearly than ever. Each whispered plan, each stolen moment, was a step closer to either liberation or ruin. "We must be careful," Ilara murmured, tracing a finger over the blueprint. "If we're caught," Cale reached out, his hand steady over hers. "Then we fight harder. For the city, for us." Outside, the distant clang of armored boots signaled another patrol passing through the streets. The rebellion's heartbeat quickened in time with the city's restless gears, a symphony of tension and hope. The coming days would demand courage beyond anything they had known, testing the bonds of love and loyalty under the relentless pressure of a city on the brink. And as the first light of dawn crept over the floating skyline, Ilara and Cale prepared to face the rising storm, knighted by a dream that refused to be grounded. The underground workshop was cloaked in shadows, the only light coming from a sputtering oil lamp that cast uneven glows on the scattered tools and mechanical parts strewn about. Cale's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the folded parchment bearing the dreaded Newsan informant, had betrayed the rebellion. His breath caught in his throat as he read the details, locations of secret meetings, names of fellow rebels arrested, plans compromised. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound head suffered in the field. Around him, the faint hiss of steam vents whispered like ghosts. The city's heartbeat now a cruel reminder of their fragility. His sharp green eyes narrowed, scanning the words again. Who had done this? How many lives had been imperiled? Doubt gnawed at him, a poison spreading through the core of his trust. He had always known the risks, but this felt personal. Joran's face flashed in his mind, his steadfast friend who had always been cautious, pragmatic. Cale forced himself to steady his breath, knowing he had to act, but not yet. This was a fracture in their foundation, and if left unchecked, it could tear everything apart. Meanwhile, high above, in the opulent council chamber, Alara stood rigid beneath the cold gaze of Lady S. The chamber was bathed in the golden glow of stained glass windows, but the warmth was a cruel contrast to the chill that seeped into Alara's bones. Lady Isolda's voice was low and measured, each word a knife. Princess, your continued association with known rebels jeopardizes not only your standing but the stability of the entire city, she warned, her sharp eyes boring into Alara's. You must choose abandon these dangerous inclinations or face the consequences. Ilara's pale blue eyes flashed with defiance, but the weight of her advisor's words settled heavily on her shoulders. The rebellion was no longer just a cause. It was a matter of survival, for herself and for Cale. The pressure to conform, to suppress her true self, was suffocating. Yet, beneath it all, her heart beat with a fierce resolve she had never felt before. At the rebel hideout, Joran returned, his broad shoulders slumped and his oil-stained hands trembling slightly. The cramped space, filled with the scent of grease and metal, felt heavier with the news he carried. Arrests had been made, comrades lost to the cold grasp of the guards. His voice was steady but laced with exhaustion as he recounted the events, the room falling into a heavy silence after his words. We've lost ground, he admitted, swallowing hard. But the fight isn't over. We can't let fear break us. Cale listened, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. The rebellion was fracturing, not just from external forces, but from the shadows within. Trust, once a sacred bond, now felt fragile and fleeting. That night, under a blanket of stars and the flickering glow of the floating city's lights, Cale and Alara met atop a rooftop, their sanctuary above the turmoil below. The distant hum of the city's machinery was a constant reminder of the stakes. Their hands found each other's, trembling but resolute. I don't know who to trust anymore, Cale admitted, voice low and rough. Alara squeezed his hand, her silver hair shimmering softly in the moonlight. We have to trust each other. That has to be enough. Their eyes met, vulnerability laid bare amidst the swirling chaos. Despite the broken trust and mounting pressures, a spark of hope flickered between them, fragile but fierce. We'll face this together, Alara whispered. The city below held its breath, caught between the past's iron grip and the uncertain dawn of change. And in that moment, two souls, bound by love and rebellion, vowed to endure, even as the world around them threatened to crumble. But as their secret meeting ended and they slipped back into the shadows, the question lingered how long before the fractures within the rebellion shattered their fragile unity entirely. The battle for the city's soul was far from over, and trust, once broken, was the hardest thing to rebuild. The heavy clang of metal echoed through the cavernous engine chamber, mingling with the sharp hiss of escaping steam that clawed at the stale air. Alara's pale blue eyes narrowed as she leaned closer to the control panel, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows across her carefully composed face. The ancient gears beneath the city groaned in protest, their rhythmic churning now irregular, faltering, threatening the fragile stability of the floating city. Cale stood beside her, his soot-streaked face taut with tension, hands clenched into fists as he absorbed the gravity of the blinking warnings. "It's worse than we feared," Cale muttered, voice low and roughened by exhaustion. "The core engine's degradation has accelerated. If we don't act fast, the whole city could lose altitude or worse." Alara swallowed the rising panic, her fingers tightening round the cold metal railing. "How much time do we have?" Cale's sharp green eyes flicked to the dials again. Days, maybe less. The weight of that reality pressed down on them both, heavier than any chain or royal decree. The city they both called home was unraveling, and with it, the fragile truce between their worlds. Later, in the flickering gaslight of Old Tome's cramped workshop, the elderly inventor spread a map of the city's mechanical heart across his worn worktable. His trembling fingers traced the network of pipes, gears, and engines, pausing at the core. "This engine," Tom whispered, voice crackling like the embers of a dying fire, "was built to last centuries, but it's been pushed to its limits. Accelerated decay comes from years of neglect and sabotage. The caste system's divisions have fractured the care it needs." Ilara's heart clenched at the thought. The very system she was born to uphold had sown the seeds of destruction. Cale's jaw tightened. "We've got to fix it, not just patch the engine, but the city itself." Old Tom nodded solemnly. "But the deeper we dig, the more it'll cost. Not just machines, but lives, trust, hope." The words hung heavy between them. Time was no longer a luxury they could afford. Outside, on the rooftop, beneath the swirling sky painted with the city's distant lights, Cale and Joran's voices rose in heated argument. "We're rushing into this," Joran insisted, pacing with oil-stained hands thrust deep into his worn pockets. "The rebellion isn't ready for a full strike. We need more allies, more preparation." Cale's eyes blazed with stubborn resolve. "And meanwhile, the city crumbles. Do you want to wait until the whole thing falls from the sky?" "I want to survive to see the new dawn," Joran shot back, frustration seeping into his tone. "This isn't just about rebellion, it's about survival." The tension between them was a microcosm of the larger battle raging within the city's fractured soul. Hope versus caution, passion against pragmatism. As their voices faded into the night, Alara stood alone on her balcony, the golden light of sunset spilling over the floating spires and ironwork below. The wind tugged gently at her silver hair, carrying whispers of distant engines and dreams yet unfulfilled. She closed her eyes, the weight of her crown feeling less like a symbol of power and more like a burden to bear. "I promise," she whispered to the wind, "I will fight for a city where no one is trapped, where dreams can soar free." Below, the city's heartbeat faltered, but within Alara and Cale, a fierce flame ignited defiant hope against the coming storm. The urgency of the failing engine galvanized their resolve. Each moment lost was a step closer to disaster. Together, they would confront the impossible, knowing the path ahead was fraught with peril but paved with the possibility of a new beginning. Their love, fragile yet fierce, had become the catalyst for change, not just for themselves, but for the floating city hanging precariously among the clouds. And as the shadows lengthened, the city held its breath, waiting for the dawn that only they could bring. The clangs and hisses of the engine chamber remained a constant, a reminder of time slipping away. Alara and Kale pored over blueprints and schematics, mapping out repairs that would require both mechanical genius and political daring. Old Tome's knowledge was invaluable. His stories of the city's forgotten mechanisms, weaving a tapestry of hope even as the threat grew. In quieter moments, Ilara's hands trembled as she clutched a worn locket, a relic from her mother, whose own secret past now illuminated the cracks in the caste system. That revelation fueled her determination, yet also deepened her fears about the cost of rebellion. Kale, too, wrestled with his haunted past, the loss of his family a constant shadow, but Ilara's presence was an anchor, a light in the fog of uncertainty. Their late-night conversations were laced with whispered dreams and tentative plans, each word a thread stitching their worlds closer together. Yet the city's unrest simmered beneath, the rebellion's ideological divides threatening to splinter their fragile alliance. Joran's cautious counsel clashed with Kale's fiery impulses, while Myra's secret training and forbidden love added new layers of complexity to the impending uprising. The city was a powder keg, and the failing core engine was the fuse. As the chapter closed, the city's fate hung in delicate balance, with Alara and Kale standing at the fulcrum ready to tip the scales, no matter the cost. The catalyst had been struck. The real battle was just beginning. The grand chamber was suffused with a heavy, suffocating silence as Lord Varric's voice shattered the stillness like a hammer striking steel. "This treachery cannot be tolerated," he declared, his cold grey eyes locking onto Alara with a venomous intensity. Around the ornate table, the nobles stirred uneasily, their whispers rising like a gathering storm. The evidence was undeniable. Now the princess and the mechanic, entwined not only in secret meetings, but in a bond that defied the caste laws binding their world. Alara stood at the center, her silver hair a shimmering beacon against the dark wood paneling. Her pale blue eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and defiance, flickered between the faces she once trusted and now saw as enemies. Lady Isolde's steely gaze cut through her like a blade. "Your actions threaten the very fabric of our society," the advisor hissed, her voice cold and unyielding. "You have betrayed your duty, princess." Myra, standing close behind Alara, clenched her fists, the fiery auburn curls framing her determined face. She exchanged a glance with Joran, who leaned against the far wall, his broad shoulders tense and jaw clenched. The rebellion's sanctuary was a world away from the opulence of the royal court, but now it was all they had. Kale's soot-streaked face was set with grim determination as he moved beside Alara, his sharp green eyes scanning the chamber for threats. The oppressive weight of the council's disapproval pressed down on them, but they would not be broken. Not now. The revelations had come swiftly. A clandestine messenger, once trusted, had betrayed their secret meetings. The council's spies had pieced together fragments of overheard conversations and stolen glances, weaving a tapestry of scandal that threatened to unravel the fragile peace of the city. "You will both be detained immediately," Captain Selwyn ordered, stepping forward with the cold efficiency of a soldier bound to duty. Yet even his voice betrayed a flicker of hesitation, a crack in the armor of loyalty. He had seen the truth in their eyes and knew the cost this pursuit would bring. Ilara's heart pounded as she whispered to Kale, "We cannot be caught. Not now." Joran stepped forward, voiced low but firm. "The rebellion will protect you, but you must leave this place at once." With hurried movements, they slipped away from the marble floors and gilded walls, descending into the shadows beneath the city. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of oil and earth, a stark contrast to the perfumed chambers they had left behind. In the cramped underground tunnel, their hands found each other, fingers interlacing tightly. The weight of their choices pressed heavily, yet within that grasp lay a fierce hope. "We fight for more than ourselves," Alara breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. "For a city where love isn't a crime." Kale nodded, the fire of rebellion burning bright in his gaze. "Then we fly, together." Outside, the distant echoes of boots and shouts reverberated through the labyrinthine streets. Their flight had begun, uncertain and perilous, but fueled by a love that dared to defy the chains of caste and convention. As they vanished into the night, the city above held its breath, poised on the edge of revolution and redemption. The battle for its soul was just beginning, and Alara and Kale stood at its heart exposed, vulnerable and unyielding. The night air was thick with the hiss of steam and the clatter of machinery as the rebellion's forces moved like shadows beneath the sprawling gears of the floating city. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest not from fear, but from the fire of determination that blazed within her. Tonight was the turning point, the moment they would take back the city's mechanical heart and shatter the caste system that had bound them all for so long. She adjusted the dark cloak around her shoulders, the fabric heavy with the weight of expectation and hope. Beside her, Kale's sharp green eyes scanned the dimly lit corridor leading to the control hall. His face was smeared with soot, his hands steady despite the electric tension in the air. For all their differences, they shared a singular purpose now. "Ready," Kale's voice was low but steady. Alara nodded, swallowing the tight knot of nerves. "Ready for all of us." Together, they slipped through the labyrinthine passages. The rhythmic pounding of their footsteps muted against the mechanical symphony of the city's core. The ancient engines hummed, their power pulsing beneath the floor, a living heartbeat waiting to be claimed. Myra, agile as a cat, moved ahead to disable the patrols. The metallic clang of her hidden blade was swallowed by the roar of steam vents, her movements precise and lethal. Joran coordinated from the lower districts, his voice crackling through the coms as sabotage spread like wildfire. "Guards are down. Systems are vulnerable," Joran reported, his voice a taut wire of urgency. Ilara's pulse quickened as they reached the control chamber's entrance. The massive doors, adorned with brass and iron filigree, stood like a gatekeeper to the old order. With a deft twist of a wrench gifted by old Tom, Kale triggered the override, and the doors groaned open. Inside, the cavernous room was alive with the clanking of gears and the hiss of steam valves. Control panels flickered, ancient levers gleaming under the dim glow of gaslights. The weight of history pressed down on Ilara, but so did the promise of change. They moved swiftly, Ilara's fingers tracing the blueprints she had memorized, guiding Kale's expert adjustments. Sparks flew as wires were reconnected and valves recalibrated. Outside, the city's mechanical systems began to respond. Lights flickered back to life, engines rumbled with renewed vigor. But the rebellion's strike had not gone unnoticed. From the council chamber above, Lord Varric's cold grey eyes narrowed as alarms blared and the city's stability wavered. His grip on power was slipping, and desperation etched into his stern features. "Seal the control hall," he commanded, voice sharp as steel. Captain Selwyn, torn between duty and doubt, rallied the guards, but the rebellion's momentum was unstoppable. The city's gears shifted, the old hierarchies grinding to a halt as Alara and Kale stood at the helm of a new dawn. In a brief, stolen moment amid the chaos, their eyes met. Exhaustion, exhilaration, and a fierce, unspoken promise passed between them. This was more than rebellion, was a flight toward freedom, fueled by love and hope. But the night was far from over. As the city trembled beneath the weight of change, Ilara and Kale knew they had only just begun to fight for each other, for their people, and for the skies waiting to be claimed by all. The engines roared louder, a thunderous anthem echoing through the clouds. And as the first light of dawn tinged the horizon, the city held its breath, ready to rise anew or fall apart forever. "We either fly together," Kale whispered, "or we fall alone." Ilara's reply was firm, her voice steady in the rising sun. "Then we fly." And with that, the rebellion soared into the unknown, hearts united against the storm ahead. The twilight cast long shadows over the rebel hideout, a labyrinth carved into the forgotten underbelly of the floating city. Flickering lanterns danced against the rough stone walls, casting an eerie glow on the faces of those who had pledged their lives to change. Myra moved silently through the narrow corridors, the weight of her secret pressing down like the heavy steam clouds that cloaked the city above. Her eyes flicked anxiously toward a dim alcove where her lover waited her, soldier from the lower caste whose loyalty to the rebellion was as fierce as her own. "They're tightening the noose," Myra whispered, her voice barely above her breath as she reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined, trembling not just from the chill but from the peril that lurked in every guarded corner. Explosions echoed faintly through the city's iron ribs, distant yet ominous, a grim reminder of the stakes at hand. "We must be cautious," he murmured, eyes dark with worry. "If they find us—" "I know," Myra replied, her heart pounding, "but we can't stop. Not now." Meanwhile, in the command center of the rebellion's operations, Joran stood with his arms crossed, the grime of the city etched into the lines of his face. His gaze was fixed on the shifting schematics projected before him, the map of the city's mechanical artery steam vents, gearworks, and the ancient engines that kept their world aloft. His voice was low but firm as he directed scattered teams, coordinating sabotage and defense with a precision born of desperation. "The northern vents will be vulnerable for another hour," he instructed. "Deploy the teams quickly but quietly. We can't afford mistakes." Yet beneath his stoic exterior, a tempest raged. The thirst for vengeance against the nobles who had destroyed his family warred against a fragile hope for peace. Each decision weighed heavily, the line between tactical necessity and reckless passion blurred by the fires of rebellion. High above, on the edge of the royal district, Ilara stood on a narrow balcony overlooking the city's labyrinthine gears and endless steam plumes. The air was sharp with the scent of oil and rain, the distant hum of machinery a constant reminder of the world she was born into and the one she longed to change. Her silver hair caught the last rays of the setting sun, shimmering like threads of light woven through shadow. Kale joined her silently, his soot-streaked face softened by the dim glow. Their fingers met, grasping tightly as if to anchor each other against the storm gathering both outside and within. "Every moment we steal like this feels like defiance," Ilara said, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fierce hope. Kale's green eyes searched hers, resolute. "Defiance is the only way forward. With or without us, this city is breaking. Together, we can be the ones to hold it together, or watch it fall." Their whispered promises were cut short by the distant clatter of boots and the harsh voice of Captain Selwyn, the city guard commander whose loyalty to Lord Veric was unwavering yet marked by moments of hesitation. He stood in the alley below, confronting a small group of rebels caught attempting to sabotage a steam vent. "Surrender now," Selwyn commanded, his voice steady but eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. The rebels hesitated, torn between fight and flight as the sounds of the rebellion swelled around them. In that charged moment, the city itself seemed to hold its breath caught between the old order and the new, between fear and hope, between love and loss. Back in the hideout, Mira's thoughts raced. Her secret love was a beacon in the darkness, but it was also a danger of vulnerability, the enemy